is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to discuss with you today for today's severe weather threat, for Friday's severe weather threat, for Saturday's severe weather threat, and Sunday's severe weather threat. A lot to talk about with you today, so let's go ahead and dive right into it. But before we do, we have our code from Storms United. This is from Teevil. John is a little bit busy, so Teevil took over for him, and he will likely take over for the next few days. Here's the situation that we have right now. We have a code yellow in effect from Lake Ontario and parts of New York all the way down to the Gulf Coast, as well as in parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, those areas as well. We have a code orange in effect from north central Illinois all the way down to the Gulf Coast, and that encompasses the enhanced risk and 30% areas. And now this is a bit of an upgrade, actually. We now have a code red in effect for Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Because, yes, there is still a 30% risk on it, but confidence is increasing on it, on the threat level down there. The parameters continue to uptrend significantly, and we'll get into more of that in a bit, but we have upgraded to a code red, so Storms United is going to be on very high alert for the next few days, and we're going to continue to keep you updated on that. But while we do that, let's go ahead and start with today's weather risk so we get that out of the way. Here's what we have going on. We have a slight risk of severe weather in effect for Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas right here. It's mainly concentrated in that region right there. Marginal risk from Mississippi all the way down, from Texas all the way to Mississippi right here, and generic thunderstorms for the rest of the areas. The hail is the biggest risk with this right here at 15% hatched, which is a 15% risk of 2-inch hail or greater happening within 25 miles of a point. Wind risk is 15%. As well, which is a 15% probability of 50-knot winds or higher happening within 25 miles of a point. And the tornado threat is by far the lowest threat with this. There's not going to be that much tornadoes with it. The shear near the surface is pretty bad for tornadoes, so ultimately I'm not particularly that concerned about that. Here's a little bit of the summary right here. Scattered severe thunderstorms will be possible from parts of North Texas and southeast Oklahoma into the Arklatex region late this afternoon and evening. Large to very large hail and severe gusts should be the primary hazards. And this is just the synopsis real quickly. Right here. While low-level winds are expected to remain fairly modest, strengthening mid-level winds and related deep layer shear should support organized convection. While there is still some uncertainty regarding how warm and moist the boundary layer will become through heating, it seems likely that attempts at robust convective initiation will occur by late afternoon or early evening across north-central Texas into southeast Oklahoma as convergence increases along or near the dry line. As any convection that can develop and persist will likely become supercellular and pose a threat for large to very large hail. Upscale growth may occur with this activity through the evening across parts of the Arklatex, with some risk of damaging winds, with any sustained cluster continuing eastward over the lower Mississippi Valley overnight. The tornado threat remains less clear, with modest to shallow low-level moisture and generally weak low-level winds, like I was just talking about, may potentially limiting factors. Still, a chance for a tornado or two may exist with any sustained supercell this evening as a southwesterly low-level jet gradually strengthens, especially in the Arklatex region. So that's the general gist that we have going on for the threat tonight from the SPC, and we're going to go ahead and go over some of the parameters with this real quickly. Let's go ahead and do that. Here's what we have with the HRRR. We're going to go ahead and start the simulated for reflectivity, and then we're going to go into some of the CAPE parameters, the shear, all that stuff, just to give you a general gist as to what we're looking at right here. And the reason I'm paying attention to this tonight is this could potentially set up an even better environment for what we're looking at Friday and Saturday, because we were talking about this on stream last night, and Tristan was especially bringing this up. If tonight underperforms, then that could, at least in the long run, be very bad news for the Deep South, because that means there's more time for CAPE to develop. There's more time for CAPE to come up. There's more time for moisture to come into from parts of the Gulf Coast over there. There's a lot more time for organization to happen as well. But here's what we have with the HRRR. Convection starts firing off around 5 p.m. or so, like at least with the main event, and then things really start to ramp up by 7 o'clock. By 8 o'clock, we're looking at more of a squally setup. Things start off a bit more discreet, but then they become quasi-linear and squally as they moved into Arkansas, Louisiana, and into Mississippi as well. So we're going to have to pay attention to that as well, but the threat should not persist past Wednesday or Thursday, apart from maybe like from heavy rain and all that stuff. So we'll continue to keep you updated. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Cape that we have pulled up for you right here. Cape starts to grow more and more. There's actually a lot more Cape than what we were initially anticipating. According to this, we're looking at, by the time convection really starts to ramp up, we're looking at around 21, 22, 2300 joules per kilogram of Cape right here compared to what we were seeing like maybe like 1700 yesterday. So there's a lot more instability to work with. But there's also a larger cap I'm noticing as well, the stable layer underneath all this instability right here. There's a stronger cap with it, like 2150 Cape to 40 Sin. That's not particularly the best if you want severe weather. You're going to want maybe that Sin to come down to maybe like 20 to 30 if you want a good cap to break right here. And we're going to have to pay attention to it. But I do think it's going to be too capped, and it's going to limit the biggest severe weather. I still think there's going to be some thunderstorms, of course, and they could be close to or near severe events, severe parameters. But ultimately, I think by the time this thing becomes a QLCS, it's ultimately going to become less severe, especially as you move through parts of Arkansas, Louisiana, and into Mississippi. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong on that. Here's the supercell composite we have for you guys. Not particularly that great. This is taking into consideration the cap that I was talking to you about. We're looking at supercell composite of like 2. So ultimately not particularly that great. SIGTOR parameters even worse at this current point. So I'm not really that concerned with it. Most unstable Cape, if we pull that up, most unstable Cape cracks around 2,000 joules per kilogram. And it's also pretty capped as well, so I'm not particularly that worried about tonight's threat, but I'm still going to watch it because this could play a role into what happens on Friday and Saturday, and let's go ahead and dive right into it. Here's what we have going on Friday. We have an enhanced risk of severe weather from southeast Iowa all the way down to Mississippi and Alabama, and it encompasses much of the state of Illinois and Missouri and Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi and Alabama right here. Slight risk from Minnesota down to Mississippi. Marginal from Minneapolis all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Probabilistic. This is a 30% hatched risk right here, which essentially means there is a 30% probability of significantly severe weather happening within 25 miles of a point, which that could mean anything from strong tornadoes to 2-inch hail or greater, or 65 knot or 75 mile per hour wind gusts or greater. We're going to have to pay close attention to that as well, particularly if you're from St. Louis down all the way down to Memphis. I want you guys to pay close attention to that as well, mainly more so for the wind threats. Things that what I will say is I do think in terms of what we're looking at, we're going to look at in terms of the northern part of it, it's going to be more of a squall line, whereas it becomes more semi-discrete in the south, like in Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, those areas right there. So we're going to have to pay attention to it. Here's a summary right here. A regional outbreak for severe storms is expected across much of the Mississippi Valley, eastward into the lower Ohio and Tennessee valleys late Friday afternoon into early Saturday morning. All severe hazards are possible, including swaths of intense winds and tornadoes. So that's what we're looking at with this right here. A strongly favored squall line is expected to develop along a surface dry line as the mid to upper jet impinges on the Ozark vicinity by late afternoon or early evening. Intense forcing and deep layer wind fields will maintain an organized squall line into the nighttime hours. Strong daytime heating and mixing of the boundary layer ahead of the QLCS or squall line will further promote swaths of damaging gusts, some of which may be greater than 65 knots or 75 miles per hour. While moisture will be somewhat of a limiting factor, QLCS tornadoes will also be possible. Convection may develop later across Arkansas into Tennessee Valley in the deep south. However, deeper Gulf moisture will be in place across this region. This will support stronger instability amid supercell wind profiles. Strong scale ascent will be more subtle across this area, but the sharpening of the dry line across Arkansas and low-level confluence should support convective development during the evening. Initial supercells may grow upscale into a line moving across portions of Arkansas, Tennessee, and northern Mississippi and Alabama. An attendant risk of strong tornadoes and swaths of damaging and potentially significant wind gusts is expected for the Mid-South with this activity. So ultimately, here's what I'm thinking is going to happen with this. I think tomorrow they're going to put a 10-hatch SIG tour for the southern part of it, and they're going to put a 30-hatch SIG wind for, I would say, everything, but mainly concentrated in the northern half of it. That's what I think they're going to do tomorrow with the SPC. So we'll have to pay attention to that. Let's go ahead now and go to the day 4 risk. This is the 30% risk that we have for day 4, 15% from Lake Erie all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Right here, we're going to have to pay very close attention to it. Day 5 goes from New Jersey all the way down to the Florida Panhandle and the Big Bend region. So let's go ahead and cover this very quickly. Here's the discussion for day 4, very quickly right here. A strong, large-scale upper trough is forecast to move across the plains into the Mississippi Valley. Intense jet streak will move into the deep south. At the surface, there's going to be a secondary low-pressure system that develops. This will aid into further northward transport of Gulf moisture into portions of the Mississippi and Tennessee valleys. This is the important part This is the important part right here. However, some uncertainty remains tied to the evolution of the convection of the day 3 Friday period into the morning hours of Saturday. Some forecast guidance suggests a relatively pristine warm sector will be maintained, or if only isolated convection develops overnight early Saturday, recovery could occur. If this scenario unfolds, a concerning severe weather setup is supporting all severe hazards could unfold across portions of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama through the day and into the evening, and eventually spreading east into Georgia overnight. Trends will be monitored closely over the coming days, and further adjustments to the 30%/enhanced risk area may be needed in further outlooks. And then for day 5, they're mainly talking about some of the parameters that's going to be going on. I think day 5 is going to be more of a squall line threat and more of a wind threat than a tornado threat. But ultimately, day 4 is the big day we are paying attention to. And one thing we're going to go ahead and show you is what CSU is putting out for this. Take a look at this, guys. 60+% probability, ladies and gentlemen. This is 3 days out. And Colorado State University is already calling for a high risk of severe weather. I have not seen probabilities so high on this before, and I started using this last year. The fact that we are seeing a 0.665 probability out of 1 is insane. That's pretty much 2/3 right there. And the fact that we're seeing this already 3 days out is even more concerning to me. It's quite mind-boggling, and the 45% risk goes all the way from Kentucky down to parts of the deep south. The 30% risk, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all the way down to the Gulf Coast. This is going to be a very powerful system. This is going to be a very powerful severe weather day, and confidence is increasing that this is going to likely be a pretty big tornado outbreak. Also, I said this before, the mode I'm seeing with this is giving me similar vibes to another tornado outbreak that happened about 50 years ago that I made a documentary on. Cough, cough, 1974, cough, cough. But ultimately, that is what is concerning. And CSU tends to be pretty good with their stuff with this. Now, granted, tomorrow we'll get better parameters and the generalization of, okay, what exactly are we looking at now? I'm waiting, and I'm very excited for that data tomorrow so that way I can take a look at it. We get more data, more information, and we can present it to you guys. But with that being said, now that you know what we're looking at and now that you know what we're essentially going to be seeing, let's go ahead and look at some models. Here's what we have going on right here, and we're going to go ahead and shift to the NAM since that's now in range. Let's go ahead and go to the continental United States. I want to start up to the top and then go further down. Here's what we have with the wind speed. Trough comes into the United States on tomorrow night. And then it starts off as relatively neutrally tilted, then becomes more negatively tilted as it approaches Texas, Oklahoma, and parts of Missouri and Illinois right here. This is the initial trough that we're looking at right here. And then you have this secondary trough right here that organizes and develops, and that is what is going to drive your severe weather threat down over a lot of these regions right here. That's pretty concerning to say the very least. And the fact is, we're looking at over 100 knots of winds at 500 millibars, which is about I'd say 18,000 feet up, but 850 is what I'm very curious about. And there's a huge, huge uptick in it's a particularly isolated spot, mind you, but 97 knots of wind. That's only 5,000 feet up. That is very concerning to take a look at, especially this low to the ground. Wind speed at 920. At this point, it's been very much uptrending. Let's go ahead and show you the 0Z, at least in terms of the setup from yesterday. We had it generally, compared to what we were seeing, huge uptrend in the runs right here. We're going to have to take this very seriously. We're going to have to pay very close attention to it, because anything that develops in this region right here is going to go boom with this synoptic setup. Now, granted, the dynamics are a little bit more confusing with this, and we're going to have to pay attention to it. Let's go ahead now and go to the surface-based CAPE, so that way we can take a closer look at it and get a better analysis on it. CAPE has definitely uptrended for the day 3 risk for parts of Illinois, Missouri, and those areas. Instead of maybe like 1,000, we're looking at around 1,300 joules per kilogram of CAPE. That's a pretty big uptick right here. And I'm going to go ahead and pluck a sound. I'm going to go ahead, first of all, I want to take a look at the simulated reflectivity. I want to go ahead and pluck a sounding for an area outside of St. Louis, just to kind of see what kind of threat we're looking at in terms of the CAPE. Okay, here's what we got right here. We have a pretty weak cap right here. Surface-based CAPE is around 1,600. The shear from surface to 1 kilometers, we're looking at 27 knots. That's pretty good for tornado development. 54 knots at surface to 6 kilometers. That's pretty good for thunderstorm development. And look at the directional shear on this thing. We're looking at a pretty good directional shear, which ultimately is going to enhance potentially some QLCS tornado development in that part of the squall line. That's something you do not want to see right there. That's something that you are going to want to pay attention to. Now, moving on to what we're seeing for Saturday, just real quickly, here's what we have going on. CAPE starts to really ramp up, and the NAM's definitely upticked theirs. The 6Z was definitely a little bit larger. But yeah, we're seeing an uptick of CAPE from the NAM based on these returns. Right here, we're looking at 2,500 joules per kilogram of CAPE based on these runs. To go ahead and show you the GFS. GFS is a little bit more conservative. Then again, these kinds of models do not typically do well with it, with the CAPE. Here's what the GEM RDPS is going for. We can try to get our general best guess with this, but the GEM RDPS wants a lot of CAPE with this to happen as well. So we're going to have to pay very close attention to it. Now, there is one thing I do want to take into consideration very quickly, and that is cloud cover, because that's going to be very important for severe weather risk. Okay, then here's what we have with the NAM right here. There's definitely going to be some sort of cloud cover with this, but it looks like to me that it's going to be more partly cloudy than overcast, especially for Mississippi and western Alabama. And I want to go ahead and take a quick gander at what we were seeing previously. Yeah, that's a pretty big uptrend in terms of clearing. GFS, I'm going to take a quick look at it as well. Definitely a decent uptrend. Let's take a look at it. Yeah, definitely a decent uptrend compared to 0Z with the cloud cover. So we're definitely seeing a lot more of that. We're going to have to take this very seriously. We're seeing a lot more clearing with this, at least, not cloud cover. We're seeing a lot more clearing. So that's going to be a bit of a concern. Let's go ahead and take a look at the supercell composite with this. Supercell composite is a lot larger. 26. 25, 26 is in there. That is pretty concerning to say the very least. I'm going to go ahead and pluck a sounding out of there just to kind of show you what we're potentially looking at, the kind of the conditions we're looking at. Here's what we have. Surface-based CAPE around 2,400. 36 knots of shear at 1 kilometer. 95 knots of shear at 6 kilometers. That is your environment. And look at the speed, look at the direction on this. This has all the makings of a very, very powerful tornado outbreak. And this is something we're going to have to continue to keep you guys focused on, because this is a very big threat level, and I would not be surprised if tomorrow the SPC goes day 3 moderate. With that being said, though, I'm going to go ahead and close the video out right here with this. We're going to be streaming again tonight at 7 p.m. Be sure to you don't miss that, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So be sure you don't miss that. We're going to talk more about this, and we're going to go more into detail, especially with day 3, since I didn't really talk too much about it in this video, but I wanted to give you a general gist as to what's going on before the stream tonight. So hope you joined that. Shout out to Daniel as a special... Shout out to Daniel as an official sponsor of the Pat's Path Predictor channel. If you want to support the channel more directly, as well as the projects I'm making, be sure to join the Patreon. It's the first link in the description down below. Join the Storms United Discord server as well. The link will be in the end screen. And be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal is to get more people engaged with weather. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.